In the kitchen, I began by starting the rice cooker so the rice could cook in the background. While the rice cooked, I turned on the electric stove and set the induction hob to medium heat. On the chopping board, I prepped the vegetables using a paring knife to peel them and a cleaver to chop the tougher meat into smaller pieces. I then placed the vegetables and meat into a frying pan on the induction hob and cooked them together. As the dish simmered, I used the microwave to heat up some leftover soup. To season the dish, I measured out the spices using a measuring spoon and cup, adding a pinch of salt from the salt shaker and a bit of pepper from the pepper shaker. When everything was done, I stored the leftovers in a food container and wrapped some portions in plastic wrap for later use. I checked the refrigerator and freezer for any additional ingredients I might need for the next day. Next, I decided to bake some muffins and a small cake. I set the baking tray and muffin tin on the countertop. Using the rolling pin, I rolled out some dough for the cake and placed it in the cake tin, while spooning muffin batter into the muffin tin. After baking, I removed the muffins from the oven with the help of an oven mitt and placed them on a cooling rack. Meanwhile, I prepared a fresh smoothie with the blender and whipped up some cream using the mixer. I then set the muffins on a serving tray and garnished the cake with chopped herbs using the chopping knife set. For a drink, I poured juice into a pitcher and added ice to the glasses. To clean up, I placed the dirty dishes in the sink and scrubbed them with dishwashing liquid and a sponge. After drying, I placed the plates and utensils in the dish rack. I wrapped the remaining dough in aluminum foil for later use, wiped down the countertop with a kitchen towel, and stored the leftover flour in the pantry. As I prepared for the next meal, I checked the gas cylinder to ensure it was full and used a lighter to briefly ignite the gas stove to make sure it was working properly. The mortar and pestle were ready to grind fresh spices, and I added seasoning from the spice jar into a small bowl. I checked the drawer for an extra apron that I might need for the next round of cooking. After finishing, I did a final wipe with a dish towel and set a fresh table with a tablecloth ready for the next meal. In the kitchen, I was preparing for a big family dinner. First, I grabbed a cold drink from the fridge and placed it on the countertop under the range hood, within easy reach while I cooked. I began by washing the vegetables under the faucet, adjusting the tap to the right water temperature. I then placed the vegetables on the cutting board and used my chef's knife to slice them finely. I used the scissors to open some packages and quickly moved on to prepare the bread. The bread knife made slicing the loaf effortless, and I placed the slices on a saucer next to the table. For the soup, I used a ladle to scoop the liquid from the pot, stirring it with a spatula to prevent it from sticking to the bottom. I measured out some flour with a tablespoon and teaspoon, adding it to a bowl to prepare a simple batter. The whisk helped me mix everything together, and I used the peeler to peel potatoes for the side dish. Once the batter was ready, I set the baking sheet on the counter, placed a muffin tin on it, spooned the mixture into the cups, and put it in the oven. The muffins baked beautifully while I moved on to make fresh juice. Using the juicer, I poured the juice into a jug and served it alongside some snacks that we ate with chopsticks and a fork. For cleaning, I used a scrubber to remove grease from the stovetop, place dirty dishes into the sink, and scrub them with dishwashing liquid and a sponge. I rinsed the pasta in a colander and sifted flour with a strainer so there would be no lumps. To store the remaining ingredients, I wrapped them in plastic wrap and placed them in a food container. Later, I heated water in the kettle for tea and kept everything organized in the kitchen cabinet and cupboard. As the dinner came together, I grabbed the pot holder to take the baking pan out of the oven. The dessert was delicious, and I made sure to pack up leftovers in a lunchbox and clean the counters with a napkin. Finally, I checked the gas cylinder for the next cooking session and lit the stove with a match before turning everything off and prepping the kitchen for the next meal. In the kitchen, I started by checking the fridge for fresh ingredients. I grabbed some vegetables and fruits and placed them on the countertop under the range hood, ready for cooking. I turned on the faucet and adjusted the tap to wash the vegetables thoroughly. Then, I grabbed the cutting board and used my chef's knife to chop the vegetables into smaller pieces. For the bread, I used the bread knife to slice it and place the slices on a saucer to serve. I used scissors to cut open the chicken packaging so I could marinate it later. Next, I grabbed the pot and saucepan to cook 2 different dishes at once. I boiled water in the electric kettle for tea, while cooking rice in the rice cooker. For the soup, I used a ladle to pour the broth into a bowl and stirred it with a spatula to prevent it from sticking. Meanwhile, I prepared a fresh fruit smoothie using the blender and used the food processor to chop the fruits into smaller pieces before blending. I measured out ingredients for the batter with a tablespoon and teaspoon, adding them to the bowl. I mixed everything together with a whisk until smooth. Then, I grabbed the peeler to peel some apples for the topping and used the grater to finely grate some lemon zest. After that, I used a colander to drain the pasta and a strainer to remove pulp from the juice, which I poured into a jug. To bake, I lined a baking sheet with parchment paper and placed the dough on it, then transferred it into the oven, preheated to 350 degrees. I also used the baking pan to make a cake with the remaining batter. As the food baked, I cleaned up by scrubbing the countertops with a scrubber and stored any leftovers in a lunchbox, wrapping them in plastic wrap. I carefully removed the baking tray from the oven with a pot holder. Once everything was done, I sat down with a cup of tea in my mug and wiped my mouth with a napkin. For dessert, I lit a candle on the table with a match, making it feel like a special evening. I finished by packing everything away in the kitchen cabinet and cupboard, ensuring the trash can was emptied.